Subscribe for more historical analysis. Jimmy Doolittle entered the Second World War as one of the most respected aviators in the United States. His background combined technical skill, scientific training, and operational experience in a way that few officers of the era could match. Before the war, he had set speed records, performed long-range flights, and contributed to the development of instrument flying. When the United States faced the Pacific War in early 1942, Doolittle's blend of engineering knowledge and operational judgment made him a logical choice for tasks that required both innovation and risk acceptance. The mission that would define his wartime role emerged from a strategic need rather than a search for symbolic action. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, the United States required a demonstration of offensive capability. American political and military leaders believed that an early strike on the Japanese home islands would have two strategic effects. It would raise American morale, and it would force Japan to divert resources to homeland defense. The challenge was that no existing platform could reach Japan directly. Land-based bombers lacked the range to strike the target and return to friendly territory. Carrier aircraft did not carry enough ordnance to produce meaningful damage. The concept that emerged was unconventional. Launch medium bombers from an aircraft carrier, bomb targets in Japan, and then continue westward to land in China. Doolittle was assigned to evaluate the feasibility of the plan. He analyzed aircraft performance, fuel requirements, runway availability in China, and carrier deck dimensions. The B-25 Mitchell medium bomber became the preferred aircraft because it provided a balance of range, payload, and takeoff performance. Modifications were required to reduce weight, increase fuel capacity, and adjust defensive armament. Doolittle oversaw these changes personally, coordinating with maintenance crews and engineers to ensure that the aircraft met the mission's specific parameters. The operation required close coordination between the U.S. Army, Air Forces, and the U.S. Navy. The USS Hornet was selected as the launch platform. Its flight deck could accommodate the B-25s, but takeoff distances would be short and conditions at sea unpredictable. Doolittle trained his crews intensively in short-run takeoffs at land bases, replicating the deck length and wind conditions expected aboard the carrier. The training emphasized consistency and precision rather than speed. The success of the mission depended on the ability of each bomber to take off safely under heavy fuel load. Intelligence planning focused on identifying targets that would produce operational effect, but not require deep penetration into Japan. Industrial areas, military facilities, and urban infrastructure became primary objectives. The mission was not designed to cause strategic damage. Its purpose was to demonstrate American reach and to complicate Japanese defensive planning. Doolittle reviewed target assignments, flight routes, and expected weather conditions. His approach emphasized disciplined execution rather than improvisation. Each crew received detailed instructions and contingency procedures for navigation, attack profiles, and fuel management. Operational timing was critical. The task force needed to approach Japan undetected to preserve the element of surprise. Japanese patrol boats operated far into the Pacific, and early detection would force a premature launch. The distance between the projected launch point and the Chinese landing fields was near the limit of the B-25's modified range. Doolittle weighed the risks and accepted that weather, fuel consumption, and enemy contact could alter the plan. What mattered was that the mission proceed before Japan could consolidate its early war successes. In April 1942, the task force steamed west across the Pacific. The bombers were secured on the flight deck, with maintenance crews monitoring fuel lines, tires, and engines during the voyage. Doolittle moved between crews, reviewing checklists and confirming that each aircraft remained within weight limit. He understood that no rehearsal could replicate conditions aboard a moving carrier, and that each detail had to be correct before launch. The operation represented a fusion of naval and air force capabilities unprecedented in American military experience. The mission's dynamics changed abruptly on April 18 when Japanese picket boats detected the task force earlier than expected. Although the boats were sunk quickly, it was assumed that radio transmissions had reached Japanese command. Doolittle and the naval commanders concluded that delaying the launch risked interception. The decision was made to launch immediately, despite the increased distance to China. This decision placed the crews at greater risk, but preserved the operational goal of striking Japan before defensive systems could react. Doolittle understood that an early launch meant every aircraft would be operating at the extreme edge of its fuel capacity. The crews recalculated consumption rates, adjusted throttle settings, and reviewed emergency procedures. None of the aircraft could return to the carrier. All were committed to a one-way flight. Doolittle led the takeoff sequence, guiding his B-25 down the short deck as the carrier pitched in heavy seas. The bomber lifted off with only meters to spare, proving that the training had been sufficient. One by one, the remaining aircraft followed each departure, demonstrating the precision required for the mission to proceed. After takeoff, the aircraft formed loose groups but did not fly in rigid formation. The plan called for each crew to navigate independently to its assigned target area. This reduced the risk of detection and allowed individual aircraft to adjust for weather and fuel efficiency. Doolittle maintained radio silence, using dead reckoning and visual cues to stay on course. The weather conditions over the Pacific were variable, with cloud layers and shifting winds affecting speed and fuel use. The crews monitored gauges constantly, aware that even small deviations could place their final destination out of reach. As the bombers approached the Japanese coastline, they encountered minimal resistance. Early warning systems were limited, and the appearance of American medium bombers was unexpected. The crews descended to attack altitude and released their ordnance on industrial zones, military facilities, and urban targets. The physical damage was limited, but the strike achieved its strategic purpose. It demonstrated that Japan was vulnerable to American air attack and forced Japanese planners to reconsider their defensive posture. Doolittle completed his bombing run and turned toward China, maintaining course despite deteriorating weather. The final phase of the mission was the most dangerous. Fuel levels were critically low, and weather conditions over China worsened as night fell. Heavy clouds, rain, and poor visibility made navigation difficult. With no reliable communication, with Chinese airfields and no possibility of landing at sea, the crews had few options. Most aircraft were forced to abandon their bombers after running out of fuel. Doolittle and his crew parachuted into rough terrain and regrouped with assistance from Chinese resistance forces. Several crews were captured by Japanese forces, while others were assisted by local civilians. The risks that Doolittle had calculated before launch became realities during the return phase. Once Doolittle reached friendly territory, he conducted initial assessments of the mission's results. The crews had struck their targets, avoided major engagement with Japanese defenses, and demonstrated the feasibility of launching medium bombers from a carrier. Losses were expected and had been incorporated into the operational plan. Doolittle believed that the mission's value lay not in physical destruction but in strategic effect. This assessment proved correct in the days that followed, as Japanese leadership re-evaluated the distribution of forces across the Pacific. The raid created uncertainty in Japanese planning and prompted the diversion of aircraft and ships to homeland defense. The raid also had direct consequences for the Chinese population. Japanese reprisals against regions suspected of aiding the American crews were severe. Doolittle and American commanders understood that the mission's geopolitical impact extended beyond military results. The United States increased support to Chinese resistance forces and incorporated the consequences of the raid into broader Pacific strategy. The raid influenced both Japanese and American planning in the months leading to the Battle of Midway, contributing to shifts in Japanese operational priorities. When Doolittle returned to the United States, he expected criticism for losing all aircraft. Instead, he received commendations for executing the first American strike on Japan and for proving that Japanese defenses were penetrable. The raid had a significant effect on American morale, demonstrating that the United States could carry the war directly to the enemy. Although the raid's physical damage was limited, its strategic and psychological effects were considerable. It influenced Japanese decision-making, contributed to miscalculations in later operations, and positioned Doolittle as one of the key figures in early war aviation. Doolittle's role in the raid highlighted his ability to integrate planning, engineering knowledge, and operational command. He demonstrated a balanced approach to risk, accepting operational danger when it served strategic objectives. His calm, methodical leadership ensured that crews understood their responsibilities and operated effectively under difficult conditions. The raid became a case study in joint operations, demonstrating the potential of integrating naval and air force capabilities in new ways. Doolittle's responsibilities did not end with the execution of the raid. After returning to the United States, he became a central figure in shaping the next phase of American air operations. His combination of technical expertise and operational credibility made him valuable to both the Army Air Forces and the Joint Planning Structure, developing the long-range air campaigns of 1942 and 1943. Doolittle used his experience from the raid to inform decisions about range extension, fuel management, and the integration of air assets with naval operations. His recommendations influenced training doctrine, emphasizing precision, fuel discipline, and coordination across branches. As the war expanded, Doolittle took command of the 12th Air Force in the Mediterranean. Although the Tokyo raid made him a national figure, his subsequent work in North Africa and Italy demonstrated his competence as an organizational leader. He oversaw the integration of multiple air elements, fighter, bomber, and reconnaissance into a unified system supporting ground operations. Doolittle insisted that air power be used to isolate enemy forces, destroy supply lines, and shape the battlefield before ground assaults. His focus on operational coordination helped consolidate the air superiority that the Allies required in the Mediterranean. Theodore Doolittle also contributed to refining the use of medium bombers. In close support and interdiction roles, he recognized that their range and payload gave them unique flexibility. Under his command, bomber groups targeted transportation networks, airfields, and coastal defenses in preparation for amphibious operations in North Africa and later Italy. His experience from the raid informed his emphasis on disciplined planning and the need to match aircraft capabilities to operational requirements. Each mission was approached as part of a broader campaign rather than an isolated strike. Doolittle's responsibility expanded further when he assumed command of the 15th Air Force, and later the 8th Air Force in Europe. The 8th Air Force, in particular, had a strategic mission: the systematic destruction of German industrial capacity and the neutralization of the Luft. Doolittle arrived at a critical moment in 1944, when the success of daylight bombing depended on gaining and maintaining air superiority. He made a key operational adjustment. Fighter escorts were ordered to range ahead of the bombers to engage and disrupt German interceptors. This change increased losses among German fighter units and accelerated the decline of the Luftwaffe. Under Doolittle's leadership, the 8th Air Force intensified its role in targeting oil facilities, aircraft factories, and transportation infrastructure. These operations reduced German industrial output significantly and limited the ability of the Luftwaffe to contest Allied air operations. Doolittle monitored the effects of each strike and adjusted the campaign to target bottlenecks that restricted Germany's ability to sustain military production. His methodical approach aligned with broader Allied strategy: apply continuous pressure on German industry until operational capability collapsed. Doolittle also stressed the importance of crew training and operational discipline. He evaluated mission reports, analyzed enemy responses, and implemented adjustments designed to increase survivability and mission effectiveness. His command emphasized tactical flexibility while maintaining strategic focus. Doolittle believed that air power's value lay in its ability to strike deeply and repetitively, forcing the enemy to allocate resources to dispersed points of defense. This pressure helped degrade German resistance and accelerate the advance of Allied ground forces. His leadership style combined technical understanding with a practical orientation toward results. He engaged with maintenance units, intelligence analysts, and operations officers to ensure that planning reflected real aircraft performance and enemy behavior. Doolittle did not rely solely on theory. He sought data and adapted accordingly. His credibility among his crews derived from his willingness to understand every component of air operations, from fuel systems to navigation procedures. This thoroughness ensured that his decisions were grounded in operational reality rather than abstract doctrine. By night, Doolittle had become one of the most influential air commanders in the European theater. His decisions contributed directly to the collapse of German air resistance and the erosion of Germany's industrial foundation. He played a central role in creating the conditions that allowed the Allied air forces to operate with increasing freedom and effectiveness. This dominance shaped the tempo of the final campaigns in Western Europe, allowing ground forces to advance with reduced threat from enemy aircraft. Doolittle's influence on the strategic bombing campaign extended beyond tactical adjustments. He helped refine the operational architecture that linked intelligence, weather forecasting, target analysis, and mission planning into a unified structure. Under his command, the 8th Air Force improved coordination between reconnaissance units and bomber groups, ensuring that targets were assessed accurately before each operation. Doolittle emphasized the need for real-time adaptation, allowing planners to shift objectives based on cloud cover, enemy defenses, and industrial output data. This flexibility increased the efficiency of each mission and reduced unnecessary risk. His command environment required continuous evaluation of enemy responses. As German fighter strength declined, German anti-aircraft defenses grew more concentrated around critical industrial zones. Doolittle monitored the changing threat landscape and adjusted approach altitudes, formation patterns, and escort routes to counter new challenges. He pushed for improved electronic countermeasures to disrupt radar-guided flak and for refinements in bomber formations that minimized exposure to concentrated fire. His decisions were grounded in operational reports and statistical analyses rather than intuition alone. Doolittle also understood the importance of maintaining operational tempo. He insisted that the 8th Air Force sustain pressure on German industrial systems even when weather and logistical constraints made operations difficult. By keeping the initiative, the Allies forced the Luftwaffe to respond continuously, consuming fuel and pilot reserves that Germany could not replace. This persistent pressure accelerated the collapse of German air defenses and weakened Germany's ability to support ground operations on both the western and eastern fronts. Doolittle viewed strategic bombing not as individual missions, but as an integrated campaign that required sustained execution. Beyond operations, Doolittle focused on improving the internal efficiency of his command. He reviewed maintenance practices to ensure rapid aircraft turnaround and worked to streamline supply chains for spare parts, fuel, and munitions. His knowledge of engineering allowed him to identify bottlenecks and recommend technical modifications to aircraft systems. He believed that improvements in reliability and organizational flow translated directly into combat effectiveness. Under his leadership, the 8th Air Force increased sortie rates and reduced downtime, contributing to the cumulative weight of the air campaign. Doolittle's leadership also emphasized accountability. He expected clear reporting, precise execution, and adherence to mission objectives. After major operations, he conducted thorough assessments, identifying procedural failures, and implementing corrections. His approach created a culture of continuous improvement. Aircrews and ground personnel understood that their performance contributed to the larger strategic effort, and this clarity of purpose strengthened discipline across the organization. Doolittle's credibility with his subordinates ensured that his directives were followed without hesitation. His strategic thinking extended to coordination with ground forces. As the Allied armies advanced into Germany, Doolittle adjusted bombing priorities to support their operations. Rail networks, fuel depots, and troop concentrations became key targets. The destruction of these logistical links reduced German mobility and limited their ability to conduct organized resistance. Doolittle believed that air power should not operate independently, but should reinforce ground offensives by degrading the enemy's operational capacity. His coordination with ground commanders ensured that the air campaign aligned with broader Allied objectives. As Germany's industrial system deteriorated, Doolittle shifted attention to preventing the Luftwaffe from regenerating strength, targeting aircraft assembly plants, synthetic fuel facilities, and transportation infrastructure ensured that German air units remained unable to mount significant resistance. Doolittle monitored intelligence on German production and adjusted missions accordingly. He recognized that the collapse of the Luftwaffe was a prerequisite for the final Allied push into central Germany. His decisions helped ensure that German air defenses could not recover in the final months of the war. Doolittle's conduct as a commander reflected his experience as both a scientist and aviator. He approached problems analytically, but he also valued operational pragmatism. His emphasis on data-driven decision made him effective in the complex environment of the European Strategic Air Campaign. At the same time, his willingness to trust experienced subordinates gave his command structure a degree of flexibility that increased mission success. This balance between structure and autonomy made him one of the most effective air leaders in the Allied system. By early 1990s, the 8th Air Force operated with a level of dominance that would have seemed impossible at the war's outset. Doolittle's leadership contributed to this transformation. His decisions enhanced the efficiency of strategic bombing, increased pressure on German industry, and supported the final Allied offensives. The cumulative effect of his contributions helped accelerate the end of the war in Europe and demonstrated the decisive potential of integrated air power when applied. Systematically, Doolittle's role in the final months of the European war reflected the maturity of the Allied air campaign. By 1990s, the strategic framework he helped shape had reduced German production capacity to a fraction of its pre-war output. Factories struggled to obtain raw materials, transportation networks were fragmented, and fuel shortages became critical. Doolittle's 8th Air Force targeted remaining industrial nodes with increasing precision, ensuring that Germany could not reconstitute meaningful combat power. He monitored the interaction between air operations and German industrial decline, using intelligence assessments to refine the selection of targets that produced the maximum operational effect. As Allied ground forces advanced deeper into Germany, Doolittle adjusted the mission profile of the 8th Air Force. The need for deep strategic strikes decreased as forward airfields became available and frontline operations required closer coordination. He shifted resources toward interdiction missions designed to disrupt German retreat routes and isolate surviving formations. Rail junctions, bridges, fuel depots, and troop concentrations became priority targets. This approach accelerated the disintegration of German defensive cohesion and reduced the ability of German commanders to execute organized withdrawals. Doolittle ensured that air power remained aligned with the tempo of the ground offensive. Doolittle also focused on preventing the emergence of isolated pockets of resistance. Intelligence indicated that some German units were attempting to reorganize in mountainous terrain or urban centers. Air operations targeted these concentrations before they could develop into prolonged defensive strongholds. Doolittle believed that the rapid collapse of German operational capacity required constant pressure. His decisions aimed to minimize the possibility of extended fighting that could prolong civilian suffering and delay the end of the war. He viewed air power as a tool not only for destruction but also for shaping the strategic timing of the entire campaign. During this period, Doolittle maintained rigorous oversight of aircrew performance and equipment reliability. He recognized that the final phase of the war carried new risks, including dense anti-aircraft defenses around remaining strategic areas. He upgraded mission briefings with updated intelligence on flak patterns and revised bomber formation tactics to limit exposure. His emphasis on disciplined execution persisted even as German resistance weakened. Doolittle's command approach ensured that operational standards did not decline simply because victory appeared near. This professionalism preserved the effectiveness of the 8th Air Force. Through the war's conclusion, Doolittle's leadership also included substantial attention to the treatment of civilians and the constraints of lawful warfare. As Allied forces entered densely populated German regions, He issued directives to limit unnecessary civilian losses and prevent strikes on areas with no military value. He remained aware that strategic bombing carried political and ethical implications, especially as the end of the war approached. His commitment to aligning operations with Allied principles contributed to the legitimacy of the air campaign during a period when its intensity might otherwise have raised questions. He believed that military necessity must be balanced with responsibility. When Germany surrendered, Doolittle played a significant role in the transition from combat operations to stabilization. He oversaw the initial demobilization of bomber groups, the repurposing of airfields, and the evaluation of equipment for post-war use. He also contributed to early assessments of air power doctrine, providing detailed reports on lessons learned during the European campaign. These analyses helped shape U.S. Air Force policy in the emerging post-war period and influenced the development of strategic air command structures. Doolittle's observations on range, navigation, target selection, and fighter integration became central to post-war air power theory. After the war, Doolittle continued to serve in senior advisory roles. His reputation as both a pioneering aviator and a methodical commander made him influential in discussions of military aviation policy. He contributed to efforts to modernize the American aviation industry and supported research into new technologies, including jet engines and long-range navigation systems. His focus remained on integrating scientific development with operational needs, a theme that had characterized his entire career. Doolittle believed that technological advantage would shape future conflicts and that air forces must evolve continuously to maintain superiority. Through his post-war work, Doolittle also helped shape the public understanding of air power's role in the conflict. His contributions were presented not through dramatic narrative, but through careful documentation of how air operations affected the enemy's capacity to wage war. He emphasized that the success of strategic bombing depended on logistics, intelligence, engineering, and coordination rather than individual feats. This perspective aligned with his consistent approach to command detailed preparation, disciplined execution, and continuous adaptation. His writings and reports informed military education for decades. By the end of his career, Doolittle had influenced three major domains of American air power: innovation before the war, operational command during the war, and doctrinal development after the war. The raid that bore his name became the most visible symbol of his service, but his broader contributions shaped the evolution of U.S. air strategy. His work demonstrated the importance of integrating technology with operational planning, the value of joint operations, and the necessity of maintaining pressure on an enemy's industrial and logistical systems. These principles remained central to American air doctrine well into the Cold War. Doolittle's legacy in American military history rests on the combination of technical capability, operational discipline, and strategic insight that he demonstrated across multiple theaters. Although the raid on Tokyo is the event most closely associated with his name, it represents only one component of a career defined by broad contributions to air power. His scientific background allowed him to understand aircraft performance at a granular level, and his operational experience enabled him to apply that knowledge in complex wartime environments. The consistency with which he linked engineering principles to strategic objectives distinguished him among senior commanders. His leadership style emphasized clarity, preparation, and data-driven judgment. He approached planning with analytical rigor, drawing on performance data, intelligence assessments, and logistical realities. At the same time, he ensured that his directives were concise and easily interpreted by subordinate commanders. This balance allowed him to operate effectively in large organizations that required synchronization across dozens of units. Doolittle believed that disciplined communication was essential for efficient operations, and he insisted that every mission reflect a coherent understanding of the commander's intent. Doolittle's contributions also reshaped the relationship between technology and strategy. He recognized early that emerging systems such as improved navigation aids, long-range aircraft, and advanced engines would influence the future of warfare. During his command of the 8th Air Force, he supported efforts to integrate new radar systems, refine bombing accuracy, and improve aircraft survivability. He understood that technological advantages must be matched with organizational practices that allowed them to be exploited effectively. His decisions helped institutionalize the integration of research and operations within American Air Forces. Beyond his direct wartime command responsibilities, Doolittle played a significant role in shaping post-war aviation policy. He participated in advisory boards that evaluated the structure of American air defenses, the modernization of aircraft fleets, and the development of long-range strategic forces. His assessments were grounded in his belief that air power could deter aggression, if supported by credible capabilities and clear strategic vision. His experience in both tactical and strategic environments gave him authority in discussions of national defense and influenced early Cold War planning. Doolittle also supported the separation of the Air Force as an independent service. He believed that air power required its own doctrine, organizational model, and administrative autonomy to meet the demands of modern conflict. His wartime experience demonstrated that complex air operations needed centralized control and independent strategic planning. His advocacy contributed to the formation of the United States Air Force in 19, an institutional change that shaped American defense policy for decades. In civilian life, Doolittle continued to support scientific advancement and aviation safety. He contributed to research initiatives involving aeronautical engineering and navigation technology. His work with industry and academic institutions reflected his belief that scientific progress was essential to national security. He maintained contact with military institutions, offering insights into organizational efficiency, training standards, and leadership principles. Through public speaking and advisory roles, he helped educate the American public about the evolving role of air power in national defense. Doolittle's legacy is also reflected in the operational principles that his commands demonstrated. These included the importance of integrating intelligence analysis with mission planning, maintaining flexibility in the face of changing conditions, and sustaining pressure on enemy capabilities. His commands operated with clarity of purpose and with an understanding of how individual missions contributed to broader strategic goals. These principles became part of American air doctrine and influenced how future commanders approached complex operational environments. The Doolittle Raid's long-term impact extended far beyond its immediate tactical results. It demonstrated the feasibility of using air power in innovative ways, forced Japan to adjust its strategic planning, and influenced decisions that contributed to the Battle of Midway. The raid also provided a framework for understanding how limited operations can achieve outsized strategic effects when timed and executed correctly. Doolittle's role in the raid showcased his ability to transform a conceptual idea into a practical operation that aligned with broader national objectives. By the end of his life, Doolittle was recognized as one of the most important figures in American aviation history. His contributions spanned pioneering flight achievements, wartime innovation, and post-war strategic development. His influence reached from the earliest days of instrument flight to the establishment of modern air power doctrine. His service demonstrated that effective command requires both technical understanding and strategic judgment, and that successful operations depend on clear planning, disciplined execution, and continuous adaptation. Doolittle's career illustrates the evolution of American air power across the first half of the 20th century. He entered the field when aviation was still emerging as a viable military force and helped transform it into a central component of modern warfare. His work left a lasting imprint on operational practices, organizational structures, and strategic thinking. His legacy continues in the doctrines and institutions that shape American air operations to this day.